This is a topic I have been wanting to talk about for quite a while now, and this is the relationship between a narcissist and an empath. I want to talk about this from my own experience and from what I feel can be playing out between these two dynamics. And I'm going to go into, based on the work of Dr. Michael Lincoln, who I speak of often, I'm going to go into the definition or the origin of narcissistic behavior, but how these two dynamics play into one another and why they are so difficult to work through. Now, since my early life experience, I had unfortunately become emotionally, I feel, attached to this type of behavior very unconsciously. I got used to it, but it was very, very, very difficult to work through it. And it really wore on me. And I'm sure if you are an empath and if you've gone through this, then you may be able to relate. Narcissistic behavior is very difficult, and I will get into it in just a moment. But I do feel attachments can play in with this particular dynamic. I feel that if there are unresolved, maybe abandonment wounds or fear of rejection, there could almost be, or even if there was narcissism in early childhood, there could be a psychological, unconscious familiarity with this type of behavior that may kind of stick around for a while until that pattern is broken or until that belief or attachment is broken. And attachment, I mean the attachment to the belief that this relationship is somehow part of my story. So we can get comfortable with the stories that we live in and recreate them over and over again without our conscious level of awareness being perpetuated by our unconscious self, our unresolved experiences from the past, and of course, false beliefs, maybe even implanted since early life of not having a relationship that is better than a narcissistic type of relationship. Oftentimes too, when we are in these particular relationship dynamics, narcissism can be very intoxicating. It can be very difficult, can bring up a lot of emotional charges from deep within. There's an unconscious mechanism within us that becomes very familiar with this behavior, even though it can really destroy us on a deep level. It almost becomes a love-hate type of dynamic where we may love someone or we may care for someone as an empath. You can see deeply into people. You can see the good within them. You can maybe also see the damaged part of themselves, and you have empathy towards that particular individual. Therefore, it may be difficult to maybe walk away or leave them when you know how much they are hurting. Narcissistic behavior is developed from an early life experience where they may have been ignored or devalued. And the narcissism develops within self. It comes in from fear-based ego or from a very, very strong egoic place, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be appreciated. This is going into a bit of the collective unconscious where we all have a bit of narcissism within ourselves, right? And if it is triggered and activated through a life situation, early life in our formative years, then it is going to be brought up in a very unconscious way and override our behaviors and our way of being and functioning. And unfortunately, with narcissists, they are unable to see within themselves. They are unable to see the unconscious shadow aspect that they are operating by. And also, too, they most likely cannot see the damage that they are creating, right? Because it becomes very much about the I, about me doing things right and being perfect and being seen and recognized for greatness, And so it almost creates a persona, a front-facing persona over someone's identity that they have formed and that has become very solid and very solidified and very hardwired within their unconscious self. And then the empath, on the other hand, is again very sensitive, can come from a lot of emotional difficulties themselves, right? Emotions with the empaths are very, very difficult to navigate. So if there are abandonment wounds, if there is a sense of fear of rejection, or if they've gone through rejection and loss on an emotional level, there could be an attachment towards this personality type just because of a familiarity, or there may be a fear of letting go of something that has been constructed within this relationship dynamic. Now, unfortunately, as I mentioned, narcissists unfortunately have a difficult time seeing within. A narcissist in their true form, in the true shadow aspect, will most likely not be accountable, will most likely not apologize, and will most likely not be able to self-reflect and look inward and see their behaviors and understand what their motivators or where their motivators are coming from, or even be able to relate to the other person in a deep way. Now, I've met narcissists in their full form who are also empaths, who are very sensitive towards other people. And that gets very clouded, that gets very mucky, because there is still a sensitivity towards other people, but yet a very strong presence of self, right? So there is only so far that an empath with narcissistic behavior can go, because a true empath in its purity is very understanding and very self-aware. All right, but an empath in its shadow aspect, who does not have narcissism behavior, but is an empath in their true form, can also fall subject to the shadow aspects of their emotions, therefore becoming very entangled within the narcissistic behavior in a particular relationship dynamic, and also may fall prey to their own shadow aspects within their emotional self. And so it's important for the empath, because the empath out of the two of them will most likely have the wherewithal to self-reflect and to break a pattern more so than the narcissist. I'm just being general about this. I want everyone, of course, to break patterns and to be self-aware and to understand their deeper selves in order to evolve past these relationship dynamics and almost influence from the unconscious, from these pains and wounds that we have within ourselves. But I feel that on the empath side, they may have a little bit more going for them in a way of being self-aware and aware of the patterns, being able to maneuver their way through the relationship dynamic to change it. Now, the empath could also, if they rise above their wounds and if they arrive into a place of full self-love and forgiveness towards a particular person or towards narcissistic behavior, however it lands, if they are able to arrive at a place of self-love, acceptance, and wholeness within themselves, they may be able to help and support someone with narcissistic behavior to evolve in some degree. At the end of the day, it is all up for us individually, narcissists or empaths, to do our own individual work. This is how we return to a state of individuation, where we can understand our deeper makings and our deeper motivations and beliefs within ourselves. But if we don't do that, nobody can do it for us. So it's not the empath's responsibility to try to help someone or try to fill a void or a hole within someone else's being or with someone else's heart. In fact, if anything, they can be supportive and understanding while maintaining healthy boundaries for themselves, which is very important. But when healthy boundaries are being instilled and incorporated between these two dynamics, it is also going to help in some degree, perhaps, depending on the level of severity of a narcissist. It's going to help the narcissist maybe even reflect and understand where boundaries need to be implemented for other people, right? So there is a level of learning that can be involved, but at the end of the day, both on the empath side and on the narcissist side, it's very important for everyone to do their inner discovery and understand their own motivators, their own behaviors, and also their own emotional self, right? Because the empath can carry a lot of wounds as well. And that's also, unfortunately, the unconscious attraction with this kind of behavior is a sense of not enough, not deservingness, non-deserving. Also, even if it is a perpetual cycle from childhood, they can easily attract these kind of relationship dynamics into their life, even though it may almost erode their inner self. And empaths because they're very sensitive, they can become very deteriorated by these types of relationships. So it's very important for empaths to have very strong boundaries and to know their self-worth, to know how to say no, and to be very vocal in a loving and compassionate way. Now, narcissists are difficult to be vocal with and to be very upfront with and very direct with, because the perception can easily be skewed within a particular dynamic. So going into the work of Dr. Michael Lincoln, I'm going to read The Origin of Narcissistic Behavior. Narcissistic personality disorder comes from a severe worth wound. They are lost in super self immersion arising from being effectively treated as non-existent by their family. They are frantically driven to demonstrate that they do exist and that they have worth, to the point where they fail to be able to see that others have worth and rights as well. So as I mentioned, this behavior, narcissistic behavior, can almost want to trump other people's needs or desires or sense of self, right? It's a very difficult relationship to work through. I have heard in some cases that empaths will naturally attract narcissists. I don't feel that it is a case for everyone. They may miss some of the red flags within narcissistic behavior, opting for the good or the sensitive side or something that may feel familiar. And then all of a sudden, this narcissistic behavior might come up over time and start to perpetuate some kind of cycle that is difficult to break within that relationship dynamic, where there can be an attachment formed, unfortunately, with this particular relationship dynamic, where it may be very difficult to break away from. So in that case, it is going to be up to the empath to work through any kind of abandonment or rejection wounds or emotional attachments that may develop. As I mentioned, empaths are naturally very emotionally attuned. But being emotionally attuned can also come with some sensitivities and some difficulties with feeling okay and feeling comfortable saying no and taking their energy and their emotions into self, being more self-contained and having authority over their emotions and well-being. Empaths are naturally very giving, very caring, very sensitive, but it can come at a cost, unfortunately. So it is very important, if this is resonating with you, if you have experienced this, or if you are in this particular dynamic, own your own energy, create healthy boundaries. It does not have to be a fight. It means to understand, where are you giving your energy to? What is the emotional attachment? How can you maybe break a cord or an emotional connection with an unhealthy relationship dynamic? And how can you feed yourself within yourself so that you are strong and whole within self, rather than losing yourself potentially in this particular relationship dynamic? Again, attachment styles may apply to this particular dynamic. A fear of loss and rejection may apply in the unconscious. So you can go into these layers within self to see what is being activated and triggered that needs to be broken and needs to be filled again within self. Brought love and acceptance brought back within self to be individual, to come to a state of individuation and confidence within self, while also still maintaining compassion towards the other person. It is a very difficult place to be, but it is very important for empaths to navigate this dynamic. There's a lot of empathy I have for narcissistic behavior, of course, because there is a lot of pain attached to it. There is a very strong disassociation or detachment from self with narcissistic behavior, right? So on that side, then it's going to really be important for someone dealing with narcissistic behavior to return to self-love and to know who you truly are on a core level, on a soul level, and spend time with yourself in that knowing or in that self-discovery phase, and to return to the place of wholeness, connecting with the heart, connecting with the emotional self, and creating greater self-awareness within. There are a lot of layers to go through here. Some narcissists, especially ones I have met, have very, very, very strong personas and strong outer layers that have been developed as an identity of self-worth, of a certain persona, right? And it can be very difficult to crack through, but self-awareness always, always wins in this. Spending time with ourselves to go deeper within of where this is really coming from. How is it transpiring in my behaviors? How are my behaviors maybe affecting other people? Not being ashamed or hard on ourselves for acting certain ways, but through observation, we get to break these cycles and thus change our behavioral patterns and develop greater self-awareness within. This is a psychological imprint. This is a psychological pattern, the empath and the narcissistic relationship dynamic, right? So it can become very intoxicating. It can become very magnetic, but they are very, very different ways of being, right? They come from a core belief system. They come from maybe attachment, maybe loss wounds that need to be healed, emotional self being brought into one, and creating healthy boundaries and creating strength within the individual self, versus the other one on the narcissist side, returning to self-love and self-awareness and letting go of the need to be seen or need to be right, and integrates vulnerability, integrate self-acceptance and accountability, and the relationship with others will start to change. All right. So I hope this offered a little bit of insight into this relationship dynamic. Of course, I would love to hear your experience if you've gone through this, or maybe you have a different perspective. I hope this video found you when you need it the most, and I'm wishing you all the best. Take care.